Here's Kamala's first edited answer from the interview.
The events of the past few weeks have pushed us to the brink, if not into, an all-out regional war in the Middle East. What can the U.S. do at this point to stop this from spinning out of control?
Well, let's start with October 7. 1,200 people were massacred. 250 hostages were taken, including Americans. Women were brutally raped. And as I said then, I maintain Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. This war has to end.
You saw that edit right at the end to give her a good answer. Now let's hear her full answer in the unedited version that was just released as a result of the Trump campaign suing CBS for how they edited this interview to help Kamala Harris look better during the election. Allegedly. It's Sean Daniel here. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, joining my YouTube membership, or just hitting that like button. Let's hear the original answer now. Come on, Kamala.
Well, let's start with October 7, because obviously what we do now must be in the context of what has happened. And as I reflect on a year ago, and that 1,200 people were massacred, young people at a festival, at a music festival. 250 hostages were taken, including Americans. Women were brutally raped. And as I said then, I maintain Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. And as we fast forward into what we have seen in the ensuing weeks and months, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. And we know that, and I think most agree, this war has to end. And that has to be our number one imperative. And that has been our number one imperative. How can we get this war to end? Well, critical elements of that are we have got to get a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done. We have to get aid in. We have to lay the path toward a two-state solution. I do believe that we must maintain that as an objective, no matter how out of reach it seems at the moment. And the work that we have to do is also pay attention to what is happening every day in the region and put U.S. resources into everything we can do diplomatically and otherwise to de-escalate what is happening in the region.
So that original answer was about 1 minute 54 seconds. After the question, it was 1.5 minutes, versus the original answer with the question was 43 seconds. So they really cut it down. That's just the first example I'm going to show you so you can see the differences and why maybe the Trump organization has sued. And this compilation of the comparisons of the edited interview to the raw interview is a result of Nick Monroe on Twitter. I'll put his link down in the description. He put these clips together. Let's get to question number 2.
We supply Israel with billions of dollars in military aid. And yet Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to be charting his own course. The Biden-Harris administration has pressed him to agree to a ceasefire. He's resisted. You urged him not to go into Lebanon. He went in anyway. Does the U.S. have no sway over Prime Minister Netanyahu?
The work that we do diplomatically with the leadership of Israel is an ongoing pursuit around making clear our principles.
That's a pretty short answer. Now the original one is much longer.
Well, let's start with this. On this subject, the aid that we have given Israel allowed Israel to defend itself against 200 ballistic missiles that were just meant to attack the Israelis and the people of Israel. And I think that is the most recent example of why what we do to assist in their defense around military aid is important. And when we think about the threat that Hamas, Hezbollah presents, Iran, I think that it is without any question our imperative to do what we can to allow Israel to defend itself against those kinds of attacks. Now, the work that we do diplomatically with the leadership of Israel is an ongoing pursuit around making clear our principles, which include the need for humanitarian aid, the need for this war to end, the need for a deal to be done which would release the hostages and create a ceasefire. And we're not going to stop in terms of putting that pressure on Israel and in the region, including with other leaders in the region, including Arab leaders.
Key thing to note, Trump was able to get some of these hostages out while Biden was not able to. Another thing, why would they edit it down so much? It's during a presidential election. Show her full answer on such an important topic, but they didn't. They cut it down so short. Question number 3 with another super short answer.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
And no surprise, the actual unedited answer is very, very long and probably a word salad. Let's see.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region. And we're not going to stop doing that. We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Another question, this time on the economy, where they cut it way, way down to about a minute with the question compared to a 3-minute original response she gave.
There are lots of signs that the American economy is doing very well. Better than most countries, I think. But the American people don't seem to be feeling it. Groceries are 25% higher, and people are blaming you and Joe Biden for that. Are they wrong?
We now have historic low unemployment in America among all groups of people. We now have an economy that is thriving by all macroeconomic measures. And, to your point, prices are still too high. And I know that, and we need to deal with it, which is why part of my plan, you mentioned groceries, part of my plan is what we must do to bring down the price of groceries.
Harris says she'll press Congress to pass a federal ban on price gouging for food and groceries, but details are yet to be defined.
Let's hear the ramble, jamble, mamble, jamble. I kind of sound like her right there.
So you are correct that under our leadership, the United States of America has recovered and is stronger than any other so-called developed nation in the world, in particular after the crisis that was the pandemic. And understand, we came into office facing a disaster in large part because of the mismanagement of the former president, Donald Trump, where the economy was in a slump. People were dying by the hundreds. It was a real crisis. But because of our approach and our work, we now have historic low unemployment in America among all groups of people. We now have an economy that is thriving by all macroeconomic measures. We have recovered in a way that we have created almost 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. We have created over 16 million new jobs as a whole. And, to your point, prices are still too high. And I know that, and we need to deal with it, which is why part of my plan, you mentioned groceries, part of my plan is what we must do to bring down the price of groceries. I'm taking on an issue I've taken on before as Attorney General, the issue of price gouging, which is not all, but some corporations and businesses that take advantage of a crisis and jack prices up, making the cost of groceries and other everyday essentials too expensive for the American people. I'm taking on the issue of housing. It's a big issue in our country. It's too expensive. There were generations before us that believed they could achieve the American dream, which included home ownership. Now I travel our country. I talk to young people every day. And they are so concerned they'll never be able to afford to buy a home or even start a family because of the cost of housing. So part of my plan is to put the resources into partnering with builders and developers to create incentives for them to build 3 million new homes by the end of my first term, and my plan includes giving first-time homebuyers a $25,000 down payment assistance so they can just get their foot in the door.
Now, without analyzing what she said, how she said it, the stance she took, the things she was proposing, why would CBS not release the full thing until now when they've been pressed by the Trump organization, the Trump team, whoever was suing them? Yes, we understand you edit down interviews because you put it on live TV, you put it on a 60-minute segment. Not everyone wants to watch the full thing. But this is a presidential election. Why would they not at least release online on YouTube somewhere the full thing for people to watch, to hear about these candidates, this candidate, for instance, Kamala Harris, that they wanted to vote for? At least give the people the opportunity. Don't just make the fully edited version because we're trying to get information on someone so we can make the huge important decision of voting for someone for president. Has massive ramifications. And to not give the public the opportunity to hear the truth about how they give answers, it's a shame. Now let's get to the next question about the child tax credit. Also, let me know what you think in the comments. Why would CBS not just share the raw version of this interview?
You want to expand the child tax credit.
Yes, I do.
You want to give tax breaks to first-time home buyers.
Yes.
And people starting small businesses.
Correct.
But it is estimated by the Nonpartisan Committee for Responsible Federal Budget that your economic plan would add $3 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade. How are you going to pay for that?
Okay, so the other economists that have reviewed my plan versus my opponent and determined that my economic plan would strengthen America's economy, his would weaken it.
But
my plan, Bill, if you don't mind, my plan is about saying that when you invest in small businesses, you invest in the middle class, and you strengthen America's economy. Small businesses are part of the backbone of America's economy.
That was a terrible answer anyway, but let's hear the real full one that wasn't edited.
how are you going to pay for that?
Okay, so the other economists that have reviewed my plan versus my opponent, because this is an election and there are two choices. Everyone from Goldman Sachs to Moody's to 16 Nobel laureates. So on the first point, comparing my economic plan to Donald Trump's economic plan, they have reviewed it and determined that my economic plan would strengthen America's economy, his would weaken it. 16 Nobel laureates, Moody's, others, have determined after reviewing what Donald Trump is proposing that he would induce inflation, increase inflation, and bring about a recession by the middle of next year.
But
my plan, Bill, if you don't mind, my plan is about saying that when you invest in small businesses, you invest in the middle class, and you strengthen America's economy. Small businesses are part of the backbone of America's economy.
So they cut out the part where she's bashing on Trump and saying, instead of giving an explanation on why her plan was good, just Trump's is bad, Trump's is bad. Let's get to the next one where she gets questioned about how are you going to pay for these things that you are planning to do and have improved the American economy and America in general.
But pardon me, Madam Vice President, the question was, how are you going to pay for it?
Exactly.
One of the things is I'm going to make sure that the richest among us who can afford it
like you?
pay their fair share in taxes.
Like you, right?
It is not right that teachers and nurses and firefighters are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires and the biggest corporations.
But
I plan on making that fair.
But we're dealing with the real world here.
But the real world includes...
How are you going to get this through Congress?
You know, when you talk quietly with a lot of folks in Congress, they know exactly what I'm talking about because their constituents know exactly what I'm talking about. Their constituents are those firefighters and teachers and nurses. Their constituents are middle-class, hardworking folk.
And Congress has shown no inclination.
That was actually a good question. Now, her answer was terrible, but I bet the full one, which is almost 2.5 minutes right here, is even worse. All right, I'm going to go get my pillow because I might fall asleep during this answer.
The question was, how are you going to pay for it?
Well, one of the things is I'm going to make sure that the richest among us who can afford it pay their fair share in taxes. Listen, again, my opponent, when he was president, issued a tax cut for people like himself, billionaires and the biggest corporations.
Okay.
My perspective is everybody needs to pay their fair share. It is not right that teachers and nurses and firefighters are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires and the biggest corporations. And I plan on making that fair.
But we're dealing with the real world here.
But the real world includes...
How are you going to get this through Congress?
Can't get it through Congress.
You know, when you talk quietly with a lot of folks in Congress, they know exactly what I'm talking about because their constituents know exactly what I'm talking about. Their constituents are those firefighters and teachers and nurses. Their constituents are middle-class, hardworking folk who know that it is not right that hardworking people are paying a higher tax rate than the richest people who can afford to pay their fair share. So that's how we deal with it. But understand also that this is, yes, it is about how we pay for what we're doing, but understand it's not, it doesn't end there. My plan is actually about strengthening America's economy, not just netting zero. My plan is about doing what we can do for small businesses and startups. Right now, the tax deduction bill for a startup, $5,000. In 2024, nary a person going to be able to start a small business with $5,000. So I'm going to extend it to $50,000. My plan is about what we need to do to, yes, expand the child tax credit, because for young families, for the first year of their child's life, $6,000 allows them to buy a crib, a car seat, and just be able to not just get by, but get ahead for that most critical stage of their child's development. We all benefit from that. We all benefit from that.
I understand, but that sounds great. It does. It all sounds good.
All sounds great.
The reality is these tax cuts have been in place for years.
They're about to expire.
Yes, and Congress has shown no...
I'm sorry, guys. I almost fell asleep on that one. I only got a few more. The final question we're going to show on here, 30 seconds versus about 2.5 minutes, about some things she's accused Trump of. Let's see. Come on, Kamala. Keep me awake.
You have accused Donald Trump of using racist tropes when it comes to Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, when it comes to birtherism, when it comes to Charlottesville. In fact, you have called him a racist and divisive. Yet Donald Trump has the support of millions and millions of Americans. How do you explain that?
I'm glad you are pointing these comments out that he has made that have resulted in a response by most reasonable people to say it's just wrong. It's just wrong.
That was it. That was it. The edited answer. Only like 30 seconds with the question. Let's see what the real answer was, about 2.5 minutes with the question. Oh, CBS editors need a raise, baby, to come up with some good answers from her.
So let's just break down what you just talked about and talk about it in the context of the words that Donald Trump has spoken and the actions he has taken, and whether that is reflective of who we are as Americans, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us.
What?
We have a former president who wants to be president again, who has a bouquet of microphones in front of him, who has said the most vile lies about a group of legal immigrants in Springfield, Ohio.
Legal?
And if I may, Bill, let me just say something. You know, from the time I was a prosecutor to attorney general to now vice president, I learned very early in my career, when the voters bestow on you the authority to have these positions, you must be very thoughtful about how you use that microphone in front of you. And, you know, when I was attorney general, the words I spoke could move markets. So the idea that the former president, who again is running to be president, would use that microphone in a way that is about vilifying and demeaning a whole population of people. You know what has happened because of that?
Answer the question.
What,
Answer the question about
one
us.
day, when this
Who support
happened,
him.
was a school day, picture day for an elementary school. Picture day.
Here we
You know
go.
what picture
Story
day
time.
is for our children? They get excited the night before. We put out the clothes they're going to wear. They go to school making sure their faces are clean and their hair is done. And they go to school for picture day. And you know what happened to these children?
No, what?
They had to evacuate that day
Yeah.
because of the fear of the threats that were being issued in Springfield because of the words of Donald Trump.
Oh, okay.
So I say that I'm glad you are pointing these comments out
Oh.
that he has made that have resulted in a response by most reasonable people to say it's just wrong.
But what about us? See, she never answered the question about... That was a lot of mambo jambo, rambo cambo. Thank you to Nick Monroe for putting these together. Now let's end it with some little random things where Kamala Harris, Jesse Waters highlights some weird moments from the interview.
I'm trying to understand how it is that with this emphasis on the border, the numbers of crossings quadrupled under the first 3 years of the Biden-Harris administration. How did that happen?
There are a variety of factors that relate to what we have seen globally and what we are not immune from at our own border in terms of what we have seen in terms of surge of immigration and irregular migration. And there are solutions at hand, but we've got to have leaders who are solution-oriented,
Like Joe
which
Biden?
we've been and are.
So they cut that answer from the interview because it gave no logical point. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I know we're rehashing Kamala Harris, but it was interesting to see really what they did not allow in the actual edited interview, how much stuff they cut out. Again, they should at least include it somewhere on YouTube, the full version, because she was a presidential candidate. It's itsSeanDaniel here. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, at least hitting that like button if you made it this far, or joining my YouTube membership. After a few days off from videos, Sean is back, and you can watch some more videos right here. I'll see you in the next one.